Welcome to the Art Colony, a podcast about art and art history in Provincetown. My name is Gaston Lacombe. Every story has a starting point. And when we talk or write about the beginning of the art colony in Provincetown, the first sentence is always, in 1899, Charles Hawthorne founded the first art school in Provincetown, the Cape Cod School of Art. There seems to be no dispute about this fact. So today we will talk about the School of Art that started it all. And this is an institute that is still very much alive, active, thriving, and is still writing the history of art here in Provincetown, a century and a quarter after its founding. And to do this, I have with me today Rob Longley, an artist, instructor, and board member of the Cape School of Art. So welcome, Rob.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you here. So let's start by having you tell us, who is Rob Longley?
I started painting seriously in 1968 with two students of Henry Hensche's. They had an art school in upstate New York, and I started as a high school student, but it was my first real serious series of art classes. I continued after that, went on, studied fine art in college, and at a certain point early in my studies with the two students of Henry's, they said to me, it's time for you to go to Provincetown. It's time for you to study with the master. So I did that, graduated from college, just started painting seriously from that point on, and I'm still at it.
Before we proceed any further, I need to clarify something.
Sure.
We hear Cape Cod School of Art and Cape School of Art.
Yes.
Which one is the correct terminology?
Hawthorne's school was the Cape Cod School of Art.
Okay.
When Henry started his school, he called it the Cape School to differentiate it from Hawthorne's school. And then when Hilda and I and the other people restarted the school, we decided that it would be better to call it the Cape Cod School of Art rather than the Cape School, or the Cape School of Art. And it was just we didn't want the confusion of, is this actually something that Henry himself sanctioned as a continuation of the school? We wanted to make sure that even though it was dedicated to his teachings, it was not the actual exact same as the former school, just as Henry didn't want to have it be Hawthorne's school. It was his own school.
So even if there's been a continuation since 1899, there's been some reinventions.
Yes. When Hawthorne died in 1930, he did not appoint a successor. Henry was an assistant in Hawthorne's class, but for 3 years after Hawthorne died, there was no school that I know of that was continuing Hawthorne's teachings. So Henry started his own school, calling it the Cape School, in 1933. Now, the story goes that one reason why Henry was not anointed as the heir to Hawthorne's school was that Mrs. Hawthorne didn't like Henry.
Okay.
And so she wouldn't allow him to take it on as a direct successor. But Henry was pretty strong-willed about things, and he just went ahead and said, okay, well, I'm going to be the Cape School then.
Okay, we have been hearing the name Henry Hensche a lot. And I have to admit that as someone who I just discovered Provincetown about a decade ago, it's not a name that's familiar to me that I can just throw out in conversation. So I will need more of a background. I've been learning a lot more, but I need to know more about Henry Hensche. He comes up a lot. He seems to be a very important figure in art here in Provincetown. So let's talk about Henry Hensche. And
just to start, I would consider Henry to be, in some ways, more important than Hawthorne.
Okay.
But that's my personal take, and revering Henry as I did, it's probably not surprising. But Henry was born in Germany. The year that he was born is a little bit in dispute because he may have wanted to lie about his age when the draft was going on in World War I. But he went to the Art Institute of Chicago and was studying painting there. And some of Hawthorne's students were students at the Art Institute, came back to Chicago and said, "This is what we're doing with this guy, Charles Hawthorne." And Henry got excited about it. The story that I've heard is that he borrowed $300, made his way to Provincetown, and basically did not leave. He did go and study in New York at times. He wasn't here year-round all the time, but he dedicated himself to Hawthorne's teachings and eventually became one of Hawthorne's assistants and monitors. From there, when Hawthorne died, Henry continued painting in Provincetown and really took Hawthorne's teachings, expanded on them, developed them, and brought into being a program of studying painting, especially, and this is important, it's just not painting, it's studying the effects of light and color. And ultimately, how do you express color relationships, light and atmosphere with paint? And that's really the most succinct way of putting what Henry was teaching. But he continued to paint, painted beautifully, and went on, again, in my opinion, well beyond what Hawthorne had taught, and developed a method of teaching, seeing, and teaching color that I think is really unique.
And he was around for a very long time.
Yeah, yeah. He was born in 1899 or 1900. And when I first studied with him in 1971, he was in his early 70s. He was continuing to paint all through his 70s and painting really strongly. He developed some cataracts. He had some problems with that later on, and some of the just general infirmities of age, but he was painting very well almost up until when he died.
So you would say that today, the Cape School of Art that exists is very much a legacy of his teachings and his views on how to represent light, atmosphere, color.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And when I have taught, that's really what I've tried to emphasize is I'm not teaching you how to make a painting of a landscape or a still life. I'm not teaching you anything particularly about even the aesthetics of a painting that you might want to create. I am trying to focus on here is the way to see and understand color relationships so that you can use paint to create effects of light and atmosphere.
So how was he as a teacher? What was the experience like being with Henry Hensche in a teaching environment?
Intense.
Intense.
Henry was not one to be gentle with his students. Many times would say, well, you're ignorant, you're this, that, and the other thing. I saw more people literally running out of his class studio in tears. There were some people who really couldn't stand the way that he taught and left, which was too bad. But he wanted everybody to have the clear understanding of what he was trying to impart. So he often would spend long periods of time dissecting paintings as far as the color relationships and saying, here's what you have to do here, here's what you have to do there. And it could be an almost devastating experience. For myself, I was kind of a cocky young guy, and I had come from this other art school, and I thought, well, I pretty much know as much as I know, and I'm gonna go in there and show everybody what I know. And on the first day of class, I just got knocked down and realized, boy, you don't know nothing.
Okay.
And many people went through that same experience. But the people who stuck it out, and it took something physically to stick it out, really accomplished something. And I say that because the class studio on Pearl Street, by the time that I got there, was mostly a big sandbox behind the barn, and people would go out and stand in the sandbox, set up in the full sunlight, and work on painting studies, mostly block studies, for hours and hours at a time. And it could be uh, an experience where you would really crave water and shade by the end of the day and be exhausted, but know you had also learned something important.
The other day I was on Pearl Street,
Uh-huh.
and as I've been learning all this new stuff about Provincetown art history, I guess I'm paying more attention to what I'm seeing. And I met a friend on Pearl Street, and we started talking, and I noticed behind him a house with a blue circle on it. And it said Hensche Barn. I was like, look at that. I had to stop right here. So that's the place you're talking about.
That is the place that I'm talking about.
So
yes.
do you remember the number?
It was 48 Pearl Street
48
when
Pearl.
I was there.
Okay.
I think they
right on the
renumbered.
curb at the end of Pearl Street.
Yeah. You can walk straight up Pearl Street and see it. And there is another barn attached to the left, and with a very small house that actually used to be a barber shop down on Commercial Street. And when I was there, that was Robert Douglas Hunter's studio, and Hunter studied with Henry for a while, and so Henry allowed him to use the studio. But what I called 48 Pearl Street, which is now a different number, was the class studio, and it had been Hawthorne's studio as well. And Henry used to tell me stories about getting down on his knees and having to scrub the floor until it was absolutely polished.
So there was the Hawthorne barn on Miller Hill.
Yeah.
But he had a different location?
That's my understanding,
Okay.
at least from Henry. I am a little bit hazy on why he also had the studio barn on Hawthorne Hill, because it is a much more spacious and beautiful studio. But it's possible that he had the Pearl Street studio for a while and then built the barn on Miller Hill. I don't know exactly.
The historical marker on the house on Pearl Street also mentions Charles Hawthorne.
Yeah.
So he was there at some point.
Yeah.
Now, Hensche was here he was in charge of the school between the 1930s and the 1980s. So he was here right in the center of the 20th century when all this modernism was coming out.
Yeah.
And we had this almost a conflict in Provincetown between the traditionalists and the modern painters coming in. So what was his role in all of this? How did he approach all of that?
Well, that was complicated. Henry was a traditionalist in many ways, but as he developed, his paintings took on a look that some could consider modernist. It wasn't the necessarily dark portraits with highly modeled figures. It was getting away from what Charles Hawthorne had done, for instance, and certain of the other more figurative painters, the Frederick Waugh, for instance. And so Henry, because of his color and his application of color, actually did show with the modernists.
Oh, really?
When they had that split. Knowing Henry, it probably drove him nuts.
Okay.
But he could be seen in that light because of the way that he often applied color. And starting out a painting, for instance, he would apply very large masses of very flat color so he could study the color relationships. And that would sometimes carry over into the painting, into his finished paintings. I sort of think that it's difficult to place him. He certainly wasn't in the modernist tradition like a teacher like Hans Hofmann, for instance. And he didn't like Hofmann. He didn't like Hoffman's students. It was a fraught relationship,
Hmm.
especially having them all around at the same time. And certainly some of them actually studied with both Henry and Hoffman and took, in certain cases, the best from both of them, I'd
Hmm.
say. Phil Mallicoat studied with both Hawthorne and I'm pretty sure Hoffman
Hmm.
and others like that.
Many iterations of the Cape School of Art from 1899 to now.
Mhm,
What's the secret to this longevity of this institution that's been going on for so long? And a lot of other teachers have come and gone, and
mhm.
these institutions have opened and closed, but you're still going. What's the secret to this longevity?
It works.
It works.
There is something very special about the way that students of Henry's, and I'm hoping students of Henry's students, like myself, like Hilda Neely, like Glenna, for instance,
Glenna Hartwell.
Glenna
Yeah.
Hartwell, I'm sorry. Uh, if you look at their color and their handling of color, you can see that they are using color and light in a very different way. It isn't based on a color theory, it's based on observation and learning how to use paints to express that observation. I look at other painters who, good painters, I won't name any names, but their color can tend to be either formulaic or just, in my opinion, kind of dull. But Henry got people to see that every different time of day had a different color scheme, different kinds of days had different color schemes, even winter light versus summer light. There's almost an infinite amount of different kinds of light that once you see it, and it takes a lot of practice and a lot of studying to see it, you can really develop a huge variety of different light effects in your paintings. And it's something that when people who are otherwise good painters see it, they frequently want to say, I want to get some of that in my own work.
And that's what you're teaching.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And this would be heresy as far as Henry and some people would go, but even in other kinds of painting, in non-objective painting, the lessons learned in Henry's classes are actually applicable. And I've known several people who are doing much more contemporary type paintings, abstract paintings, and so forth, who have incorporated in their own ways the lessons that they've learned from Henry. Henry wouldn't like that.
Okay.
But for all that I loved him and respected and admired him, he had a very narrow focus as far as what constituted good painting and what did not constitute good painting.
If I remember correctly, he passed away in 84?
No,
No,
no.
I did not remember
It
correctly.
was 1990 or 1991.
Oh, much later, but he
Yeah,
stopped teaching before that, right?
he was teaching through the '80s
Okay.
as much as he was able to. I think he began to really slow down around '89 or '90, but, uh, he was teaching as much as he could. He lived to teach,
Okay.
and it was true dedication to his cause. So I wouldn't be surprised if he was trying to teach on his deathbed.
So at what point was there a change in leadership at the school? At what point did you take over?
Well, I never took
I
over
mean,
per
you as
se,
the
but
the
yeah,
the group of
yeah,
students who took
okay.
over from him.
In the mid '80s, there was a situation that involved even a little bit of scandal that is a little bit too complicated and not germane to the conversation. But bottom line is that Lois Griffel took on the school in the mid-'80s. And Henry at first was working with her, and then there was a rift. And she had the actual Pearl Street buildings and was conducting her classes there, and Henry was conducting classes at his home on Conwell Street. Lois, unfortunately, wasn't able to keep the school running, and Henry died. So for about 20 years, there was a lot of talk of, well, we should start the school again, we should start the school again. And several of us taught individual classes, private classes. I taught private classes for a number of years, and I also taught at the Art Association. But finally, in 2010, Hilda Neely got in touch with me and said, "Look, Rob, it's time we got this going again." And I will give her credit. She was really the force and the energy behind doing it. And I kind of went along going, "Gadoop, doop, doop, doop." But she lined up a lawyer and an accountant and a group of the rest of us. And from there, we started meeting regularly and saying, what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? What's our mission? And basically, let's get this going again. So it took a while, but we were gradually able to gather enough teachers together and put together a good course of study and get things going. And it's been going since then.
That's great.
It is, yeah.
And what did you define as your mission?
I would have to see it to give you the exact language, but bottom line was we exist to perpetuate the memory of Henry Hensche and his techniques of painting and seeing color. So that would really be the nutshell there.
And where is the school located nowadays?
The school has 2 locations now. We have a studio space on Shank Painter Road with a nice North Light studio that has lots of space if people have to paint out indoors. And then there's a fairly big yard space where people can paint outdoors. And that's one physical location. The other is we now have a studio at Whalers Wharf on the 2nd floor, and that will be used for a certain number of classes. Glenna Hartwell will be teaching some portrait classes there, and it will be exhibition space for some students. It will also have other events. I'm going to be doing a series of talks through the summer on selected Tuesday nights, just talking about what we're talking about here, giving some history, showing some slides of Henry's work, of students' work, and talking about what Henry taught us. So we have both of those locations. And then a lot of the classes, because it's plein air painting, teachers take their students out all over town, all over in the National Seashore, anywhere where they can find a place to stand where they're not blocking traffic.
Mm-hmm.
I've taken students when I was teaching really just about everywhere between Wellfleet and here. And there's endless sources for painting here. It's one of the wonderful things about painting in Provincetown. It's
Absolutely.
beautiful.
Yeah, and I'm very happy to see your location in Whalers Wharf because,
Yeah.
as I've mentioned, my gallery is located in Whalers Wharf,
Yes.
and I'm always happy to see more and more art establishing itself in the wharf.
Yeah.
Not another mortgage office,
Yeah.
but an actual art institution coming in and attracting more people.
Yeah.
That will also come to my gallery, of
Yes.
course.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I had a funny situation a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago. I saw somebody walk in through the wharf, stop in front of my gallery, look around at the 3 floors,
Mhm.
and she said, "Oh, I think this is where the art colony is."
Well, okay.
Sure, we have a lot of artists here. Let's just say that it's here.
No, I like it in Whalers Wharf. We had a paint off a couple of weeks ago, that brought people into the studio. It brought people into Whalers Wharf, and they were out painting out and back. And that, I think, really provides a lot of energy for not only our school, but also for the town in general. I
Mhm.
know that people love seeing people out on the streets painting.
No, they absolutely do.
And I used to paint on the streets all the time. It was up at 6 in the morning, getting my paints out there, break for lunch, go back out. And other than people coming up to me and saying, "Where's the nearest bathroom? Where's Sal's place? Are you an artist?" But it was a lot of fun, and I met a lot of people, and just being able to show people that Provincetown is a very vital art community
Yeah, art is
today.
alive here,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah.
happening. And you have no problems with people standing and watching you work?
I rarely had a problem with people standing and watching me work. Some people are bothered by it more than
I
others.
am.
Yeah.
Very much am.
I got used to it painting on the street, and people could come up and talk to me, and if I really needed to concentrate on something, I'd say, "Just give me a minute." For the most part, people were polite. I did one time hear somebody drive by. I was painting out on Route 6 and the horn was honking. The car drove by and a person said, "Hey, artist, paint this." And he was mooning me. But I sort of felt like you had to put up with that sort of thing in order to be painting outdoors. And like I said, most people were polite. And one of the things that I observed over the years was that a lot of people who come to Provincetown or anywhere, even though they may have a little bit of an idea that Provincetown is an art colony, and I'm sure you have this experience, they'll say, "I have never seen an artist at work before." Be accommodating to them. Show them that, not all artists are what a stereotypical artist is thought of. We're just regular people,
Mhm.
and it's just that some of us happen to have the urge or compulsion to make some kind of imagery on canvas. But
No, it's absolutely true. Having a gallery, I deal with hundreds of people a day in the
sure,
summer.
yeah,
The most common comment I get is people commenting on the fact that they did not realize how much art there was in Provincetown
yeah,
and how alive it is.
mhm,
And often these are people who are very well traveled.
yeah,
They say, "Well, I've been to Santa Fe and I've been to Woodstock, New York, and I've been to this place and that place, but that does not compare." I
yeah,
have these conversations every day. And that's also one of the reasons I started this podcast, is to really broadcast
yeah, yeah,
the fact that this is a very unusual place.
yeah,
And
mhm,
those of us who live here, we get used to it. We get
mhm,
used to having artists and galleries and art openings and art strolls every day.
yeah,
Not every day, but almost. And when you look at it through the eyes of the visitors,
mm,
then you see that, yeah, we live in a very unusual and special place.
we do, we do, yeah. I love it here. I moved here full time 5 years ago. But I've been coming to Provincetown, like I said, summers since 1971. It brings me back. My wife has been coming here her entire life. She started coming here with her parents long enough ago that they wouldn't even make reservations for a place to stay in town. They just show up and walk around and find a place. My older daughter lived here for years. She worked for the Center for Coastal Studies. My younger daughter works for the Provincetown Art Association. And so it really became something that was ingrained in the family. I will keep on coming here until, well, I'm here.
You are here. Yeah.
And as long as I can climb the stairs up to my place, I'll stay.
And in discussing the vitality of the art colony
Mhm,
here, you've experienced it over 50 years. Have you
mhm.
seen some fluctuations, some changes, some things that are not the same or better or worse?
The major fluctuation that I've seen is that there are fewer and fewer young artists who are able to live and work in town. When I first came, I camped at Coastal Acres, which I'm sure some people can still do, and Dunes Edge. I lived in Dunes Edge for several years
Those are
later on,
campgrounds in the
camping,
area.
yeah. When I first came, there were little sheds that maybe had a sink and a shower and a hot plate in them that people could live in. Uh, oh, the Heaton Vorse House, for instance, that now is hosting so many art events, that was kind of a boarding house for artists and anybody else who needed a cheap place to stay, and there were places like that all over town. There were, wives of fishermen who, uh, made a little bit of extra income by renting out rooms during the summer, and those were all over town, so you could find places to live. I had one friend who lived under the oil tank on Shank Painter Road, and it was a dry place. There were 3 or 4 other guys just pulling out their sleeping bags there every night,
Wow.
and, eventually, the oil company caught on and put up barriers so nobody could get under there, and I used to walk around in the dunes right by Shank Painter Road where it's all developed now, and there were little campsites in there that people could camp in, and I don't think as long as they didn't bother anybody, that they weren't gonna be bothered, so that is one of the things that I've seen that is really too bad, because having so many young artists around town really gave a vitality, and not just to Henry's school. We really were a fairly tight-knit group and pushing each other on and doing things together, but you'd see the same thing around town with other people, just, "Okay, I'm here to work as an artist, I'm working in a restaurant at night or the fish factory or whatever, but I'm here to work." And we as a school have difficulty with that now. We have a little bit more trouble attracting younger students because how many of them can come to Provincetown and afford to live here for a week? Or, I mean, how many could afford to come as I did when I was in college? I'd get out of school on middle of May and stay until I had to go back to Boston to start going to classes.
So,
But
so who are your typical students at the moment?
it seems to be a mix. When I was teaching, and I haven't taught in a couple of years for a couple of reasons, but there are people who range from complete beginners who, in some cases, are just looking for a place to take art classes, and they see an ad for the Cape School, and they say, "Well, this looks interesting," and on up to working professionals who know that they will get something unique from the teachers who are there, and everything in between. So I had all skill levels. I had people who would return every year to study with either me or with any of the other students, because for one thing, they'd also get a little bit of a different experience. Mary G. Marino, for instance, has a different set of things that she's going to do in a class than Hilda will do. But there's all the underlying relationship of we are still working on perpetuating Henry Hensche's ideas.
So, if a student was trying to find a place to learn to paint, what would be your sales pitch to that student so they would go to the Cape School of Art?
If you go to the Cape School of Art, you are going to learn something absolutely essential and important as far as seeing color and being able to express color and atmosphere with paints. That may not satisfy certain people, but if you catch the right people who know that being able to use color and see color is important. They are the ones who are going to respond. There are certain people who are going to want to go to an art school and learn to draw. When I was teaching, I would say, or I would tell people, well, you're a little bit out of drawing here, you're a little bit out here. Or if it was composition, I might talk a little bit about composition or perspective or some of the other basic elements of traditional painting. But always the focus for me was, you are going to get something very unique about how to use color in painting. And that's whether it's still life painting, landscape painting, portrait painting, or what have you. It's going to be something that you're not going to get anywhere else, save for one or two students who live in far-flung places. If you come here to study, you will have an experience that you will not have anywhere else. It's going to be exhausting. You're going to get frustrated as hell, but you're going to get something important.
So we've talked about the past of the school, the present of the school. How do you see the future of the school?
We are always looking to expand with more places where we can have students paint. We are constantly on the lookout for ways to have affordable housing, which everybody else is here, of course. I would say that the future of the school really lies on, well, partly just keeping things going, but getting it so that we can have young people come from art schools. When I was here, we had college students who would hear about Henry and just say, "Oh, well, I could go and spend a couple of weeks in Provincetown and learn something about this." Getting a little bit more of what we represent out there to people is always important, because people hear about it. And back when I was in college, for instance, people would hear about Hawthorne on painting, the book, and they'd say, "Oh, well, there's somebody teaching this. I'd like to do that." And then they'd hear about Henry, so they'd come because of that. I'd like to see in the future more the people who are teaching and the people who have taken classes here out there saying, "Hey, this is what I'm doing," so that we can continue this very important work and expand it. I'd really love to see something like Hawthorne's classes, where there'd be 50 students on the beach.
Well, that would be great.
Fabulous.
Right there at the end of Whalers
Right there
Wharf.
at the end of Whalers Wharf.
Exactly.
Yeah, we could do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then come in and get an ice cream cone and stop by your shop. And,
Well, no, I always have this issue when people have small children with ice cream cones and they come in my gallery.
Well, I understand that.
Yeah.
I won't encourage that.
Yeah. They're fine. They can come in. Well, this has been a fascinating conversation. I've learned a lot about the Cape School of Art today, and I hope our listeners have as well.
I hope so too.
It's a very fascinating history. It's a very long history.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you very much for sharing it with us.
And I didn't even give you any of the dirt.
We're keeping it clean. Thank you so much for sharing it with us.
I really enjoyed it.
And thank you, everyone, for joining us. And until next time.